take off on Hyde Park in London, where people jump up on a soapbox and share their story. It's a little more organized than that. We have subjects and we try to stick to the topic. Today we are discussing, well, the question is Israel. Whose land is it anyways? Is that about right? We never talked about that.
Well, the subject was one state or two.
One state or two.
One state or two. What's the way forward in the Palestinian-Israeli problem?
What is the way forward in the Palestinian-Israeli problem?
That's
the
right.
ongoing problem.
Yeah.
We have two speakers, Merle Terleski and Wissam Cooley. I hope I got that right. Yay. The only rules are that it be respectful and you know, just we respect each other and don't diss one another, diss political ideas and so on. Merle, speaking first.
No, Wissam is.
Wissam speaking first. Okay. Wissam Cooley is a 5-year political science or a 5th-year political science student and student of international relations. He's the club president of the Solidarity for Palestinian Human Rights. Might have messed that up a little bit. No? Okay. Which basically the purpose of the organization is to raise awareness of the struggle of the Palestinians and advocate for human rights. Wissam has extensive personal and academic experience with Middle East politics. He has witnessed firsthand the refugee camps in Lebanon as part of a filmmaking crew. And he is our first speaker today. Wissam, I give the mic to you.
Firstly, I want to thank, can you guys all hear me? Yeah? Okay, firstly, I want to thank Speaker's Corner for putting this event on. I think it's very important. It's a very important issue to discuss, and it's rare that you get to discuss it you know, evenly with both sides represented in a public forum, so I think that's very important. So thank you to the organizers of this. Just a disclaimer before I start, on the question of one state or two state, I'm not Palestinian, and so personally I try to, as much as possible, not take a position on important issues like this, because these are decisions that will have to be made by the Palestinians. What I am going to talk to you about, though, is why I think a one-state solution is a plausible and workable solution. Because just as it's unfair to force a solution on the Palestinians, it's also unfair to detract from a potential solution if it's actually just and workable. So that's what I'm going to be doing. But firstly, I'm going to define these terms. So we're talking about, the question is one state versus two state. What do we mean by one state and two state? I'll go into two-state solution first. Basically, that's the one that everyone sort of knows. It's, I'm just going to take this. It's the solution that basically the occupied Palestinian territories of the West Bank and Gaza will have Israeli military withdrawn from them, and you would have two states established side by side, Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza next to the current Israeli state. And that's the two-state solution. Another characteristic of the two-state solution is that it's effectively a dead solution. And I'm going to go into why that is in a second. Now, as for one-state solution, it's a solution that sees Israel annexing the West Bank and Gaza, making all of the territory in the occupied territories part of the land of Israel, and extending citizenship to all of the Palestinians in that land. It's so those are the two solutions. I'm going to put this back. Sorry about that. There's a lot of papers here. Basically, I'm going to talk a bit about what a one-state solution offers to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The first thing the main thing really that the one-state solution has on the two-state solution is that it resolves the core issues in this conflict. Now, the core issues are basically three, and these issues have been the biggest sticking point in all negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians up to this point, and are basically the reason why all of these negotiations have failed to this point. The core issues are these. They're settlements, Jerusalem, and Palestinian refugees. I'll talk about settlements first. They're probably the biggest obstacle to a two-state solution, and the reason why earlier I said that two-state solution is basically dead. First of all, we're talking about settlements that have been built inside of the West Bank on Palestinian territory, and they're settlements with Israel builds these settlements, and there are Israeli settlers living in them. And they're absolutely illegal under international law. It's illegal to build settlements in occupied territory, and there's a 2004 International Court of Justice ruling that confirms that these settlements are illegal in the West Bank. The problem is that over 42% of the land in the West Bank is currently controlled by settlements. This includes, land that's been currently inhabited, apartment blocks, as well as other things needed for the settlement, land reserves, agricultural and industrial facilities, bypass roads, stuff like that. 42% of the land of the West Bank is under settlements, under settlement control, and there are also over 500,000 Israeli settlers living in the West Bank. So the question in a two-state solution, if you're going to establish a Palestinian state on the borders of Israel, is what do you do with these settlers that are in this Palestinian territory? You're going to forcibly relocate 500,000 people. It's pretty well unworkable. And in most solutions, you're going to have to at least relocate a lot of those settlements. What a one-state solution offers in this case is it resolves that issue. If you have the entire country made into, both sides made into one country, they share the land, there's no need for these settlements to go anywhere. If there's no Jewish side and Arab side, they can just stay where they are. So that's what the one-state solution offers on that. The question of Jerusalem is the most obvious, how one state resolves this. Jerusalem, the issue is both sides want it as their capital, and there's a bunch of different ways that you approach this issue. Some people have said that it should be divided between East and West Jerusalem. It's very difficult because Israel has effectively annexed Jerusalem, and anyone who's been there can see that it's basically one state now, one city now, and it'll be very hard to divide it. Israel doesn't want to even divide it. The official position is that they want the entirety of Jerusalem to be part of the Israeli state and Israel's capital. There have been proposals to put it under international auspices. These issues aren't, again, they don't exist in a one-state solution. You have one country, that'll be the capital for both Arabs and Jews. Very simple. Now, refugees. Refugees are I'd say, one of the biggest sticking points, and also for the Palestinians, the core of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And here's why. First of all, the background on the refugees is that these are refugees who were expelled. We're talking about refugees expelled from what is currently the land of Israel in 1948. Okay, in the 1948 war and the civil war that preceded it, 700,000 to 800,000 Palestinian refugees were expelled from the land that is currently the territory of Israel. Over 500 Palestinian villages and towns were destroyed in that war. One of the most well-known examples is the town of Deir Yassin, where over 100 Palestinian men, women, and children were massacred by Zionist militias. The village was completely destroyed. It happened on April 9th, 1948, and it's important to recognize this because there is a sort of myth that's propagated often by the pro-Israel side that the refugees were ordered out there, that for various other reasons they weren't. It wasn't part of the Zionist plan to expel them. This happened on April 9th, 1948. This is a full month before Israel declared its independence and the surrounding Arab armies invaded Israel. So there was no real Arab-Israeli war with the other countries at this time. It was a full month after that. So this was part of the refugee crisis. Currently, there are now, including refugees from more recent conflicts, as well as the descendants of these people, direct descendants of these people that live in refugee camps. There are currently 6.6 million refugees registered with the United Nations. Approximately 2.5 million of them live in the neighboring countries of Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan, a lot of them in refugee camps. Another 2 million live in the West Bank and Gaza. And a lot of people don't know this, but over 2/3 of Gaza's population is actually refugees who were expelled from Israel in 1948. And obviously we've seen some population density is very high. There's a lot of, the poverty rate is very high in Gaza because you have such a huge influx of people that have come in after being expelled from their land. Legally, under international law, these refugees have the right to return to their land. This is recognized, first of all, the United Nations, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that people are allowed to return to their land, as well as UN General Assembly Resolution 194, passed specifically after the 1948 war, which says that the refugees have the right to return to their land. So legally, they have a right to return. The question is, why haven't they been allowed to return yet? And I'm going to address this right now, and the reason I bring it up right now is because it's the same reason that a one-state solution hasn't been implemented, and it comes down to Zionism, okay? And this is the state ideology of Israel. What we mean when we're talking about Zionism, in a nutshell, it's the ideology that sees the need for the establishment of a Jewish national state in Palestine. But as far as Palestinians are concerned, it is a fundamentally racist ideology. And as for why the one-state solution, the refugee solution, right of return, can't be implemented, it comes down to a concept called demographic threat. Israel has this sort of identity crisis where it identifies itself as a Jewish and democratic state. In order for a state to be Jewish and democratic, if you can even say that that you can have a democratic state that identifies as an ethnic state, you must at least have a majority Jewish population. If you were to allow millions of Palestinian refugees to return to the land of Israel, it would threaten the demographic balance in Israel. There would be a possibility of there being more Arabs in Israel than Jews. What this would mean is that either Israel would have to, Arab birth rates are also higher, so in a very short time, you would have, for sure, a majority Arab state, most likely. And so the question then becomes, if you're Jewish and democratic, what do? If the majority of your population is not Jewish, and you're in a democracy, ruled by the majority means you are no longer a Jewish state. But if you have a majority non-Jewish population, and you enforce, the will of the Jewish minority, you lose your democratic nature. You are no longer a democratic state. And this is the issue that Israel faces. This is why they haven't implemented the right of return for the refugees, and it's also why they can't implement a one-state solution, because annexing those lands and bringing all of the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza into Israel would also threaten the demographic balance. There are a lot of Palestinians there, and demographic studies show that within a few years, Arabs will be the majority in the entirety of the West Bank, Gaza, and Israel. So, all in all, Palestinian refugees who were born in that land, were expelled or fled from it as refugees, have an internationally recognized right to return. Many of them actually still hold the title deed to the lands, and they can actually identify the places where they grew up or where their title deed shows that they own. These people are not allowed to return to that land. Why? It comes down to the fact that because they're not Jewish. This is what it is. And any person in the world, because of Israel's Zionist state policy, simply by virtue of being Jewish, can return to that land, go live there, get Israeli citizenship, and if they decide to go and live in a settlement, legal settlement, they also get subsidized by the Israeli government. So, again, it comes down to race. This is why Palestinians view Zionism as a racist ideology, because you are denying and extending rights to people, political rights to people, based on their race. People who are Jewish are allowed to come back. People who are Arab are not allowed, even though that in many cases, you're talking about the same Arabs who used to live there, and the only supposed Jewish connection is based on a biblical claim that goes back at least thousands of years. Okay, so
as opposed to colonialists that showed up in the 7th century.
Sorry, I'm not really talking about the 7th century right now. There will be a chance for open mic at the end. Okay, so yeah, let's just keep it calm, guys. We'll
Keep it calm.
Yeah.
Keep it calm. You'll have your turn.
I'll ask a question.
yeah, please do. All right, and for this reason, I say, and most Palestinians are saying, that Zionism has to go. This is a core issue with Zionism, and in any solution, Zionism will have to be removed from the guys. Just keep it, please. Yeah. So, in any solution, Zionism.
Credit to your cause.
Please.
Did you already say?
I didn't. And
It's too bad the Nazis dissembled my family. That's the people that support your cause. Good job.
okay,
Okay, what's that?
Yeah.
Okay, continue with that.
Okay. Yeah. Let's just keep it calm, please.
And respect. Keep it calm and respectful.
Yeah, calm and
if it's-
respectful,
if-
please.
As far as it is possible.
Yeah. Okay. So again, Zionism has created this issue. Yeah. I just want to make sure nothing escalates over there. So.
No, don't worry. Keep on going.
Okay, I'm going to continue. And another reason why Zionism has to go, and if you're looking at the history of the conflict, is that Zionism actually brought this conflict into existence in the first place. I'm going to go into some of the history about this. There's a myth often propagated that Jewish-Arab conflict is centuries old. And this is simply not true. The Arab-Jewish conflict in Palestine is relatively new. And it was Zionism that introduced this conflict into the region. So the main issue with Zionism, the way I see it, is that it emerged from a very different context than what it was applied to. Zionism came out of 19th and 20th century Europe. There was extensive anti-Semitism. This is well recorded. Everybody knows this. There were pogroms in Russia. There was, governments would make anti-Semitic statements. Anti-Semitic material was published and released widely, culminating obviously in the Holocaust. So that was very rampant in Europe, and out of this emerged this idea that Jews need a national state of their own in order to be protected. Now, the problem is that they wanted to apply this in Palestine in the Middle East, where that Jewish-Arab conflict never really existed, certainly not to the degree that it existed in Europe. There was anti-Semitism to a degree, right? Jews were discriminated against under Arab and Turkish empires, but no more so than anybody else was. Arabs were discriminated against under the Turks. We know that Armenians were very much discriminated against under the Turks. Other minorities were discriminated against under the Arabs. So Jews were discriminated against, but no more so than anybody else. That's how empires work. But in the context of what they went into, on the personal level, on the ground in Palestine, which wasn't the center of the empire, people were people were actually very welcoming to Jews before Zionism came in. So you see the first major immigrations of Jews into Palestine in about the 1880s. And there are plenty of stories. There was no real conflict at that time, and there are plenty of stories of Palestinians actually welcoming Jews in and helping them get on their feet. You have stories of people who say that, I used to have Arab neighbors, Jews used to have Arab neighbors, we used to babysit each other's kids. There are stories of people in Calgary, people that I know personally, who have said that my parents or grandparents used to actually brought Jewish immigrants into their home and let them live in their homes while they got on their feet, new immigrants coming in. And this was how things were in Palestine. There was no real conflict until Zionism introduced it, and here's how it did. In 1917, the British government passed a declaration called the Balfour Declaration, wherein they declared that they acknowledge, the British government supports the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. In 1920, when Britain took control of the Palestinian territories after defeating the Ottoman Empire in World War I, Britain took control and inserted the text of the Balfour Declaration into the British mandate. What this did was it signaled to the people in the region that there is a movement now supported by the government that controls that region to establish a Jewish state in Palestine. And so the Palestinians obviously become very worried, and this is where the conflict comes out. You see the first Arab riots emerging in the 1920s after the Balfour Declaration and the British Mandate. And most of that was directed against the British, but some of it spilled over into intercommunal conflict with the Jews, and so there was fighting then. That's when fighting really started in Palestine between Jews and Arabs.
Squeeze down.
Yes.
5-minute bell.
Okay. Can I have a little more time because of the whole thing? All right, thanks. So that's what happened, and since then we've seen the development of the issue, and that's where conflict really started and existed until today. Now, in case there's any question, the expulsion of Palestinians from their land in 1948 was necessary to the fulfillment of the Zionist dream. So the Palestinian fears in 1920 were not uncalled for. And we have statements from Israeli political figures that confirm this. So in 1914, Moshe Sharet, who would later become the first foreign minister of Israel, said, I quote, "We have forgotten that we have not come to an empty land to inherit it, but we have come to conquer a country from people inhabiting it." David Ben-Gurion, who would later become Israel's first prime minister, said before Israel was established, referring to the Arabs, "Let us not ignore the truth among ourselves. Politically, we are the aggressors and they defend themselves. The country is theirs because they inhabit it, whereas we want to come here and settle down, and in their view, we want to take from them their country." And after 1948, after the war had gone and many Palestinian towns, villages were destroyed, he later commented, "The Arabs of the land of Israel have only one function left to them: to run away." So if there's any question that the Zionist dream required the expulsion of Palestinians to be successful, Zionist leaders themselves acknowledged this. They knew that they were the aggressors here and that they had to expel these people. And the Arabs knew that in the 1920s. And this is where you see conflicts start to emerge. You start to see anti-Semitism here because this was all done in the name of Jews. Very sadly, the Zionist movement has done everything it's done in the name of Jews. So when you have anti-Semitism and Jewish-Arab conflict in the region, that's what it draws back to. And that same ideology that created this Jewish-Arab conflict is in the same ideology that required in 1948 the expulsion of refugees, is the same ideology that today does not allow for those Palestinians to return, for those refugees to return, and the same ideology that today means we cannot see a one-state solution between Israel and Palestine, a just and democratic solution that offers resolutions to the settlement issue, to the Jerusalem issue. We can't do that because of the same conflict, the same ideology that started this conflict in the first place. Now, you see that in the Zionist camp, there's sort of two sides now that are starting to emerge. There's a more leftist camp that's really pushing for a two-state solution, and I'm not sure if Merle is going to talk about that, but that's the other side of the two-state solution. There's that camp, and basically the idea behind that is you need to keep Zionism alive. In order to keep Zionism alive, we need an Israeli state with a Jewish majority. There's no way of keeping the settlements and the West Bank with that Jewish majority. And so let's accept a two-state solution and just sort of concede to just having Israel as their Jewish majority state. And it's tough because that's not really a plausible solution anymore, but that's what they push for. Palestinians, on the other hand, are today just as they were before Zionism came. They're willing and, in fact, want to live in peace and equality with their Jewish neighbors. They want a one-state solution, they want equality, they want justice, and they want peace. If you want proof, talk to any Palestinians. I've talked to Palestinians here, I've talked to Palestinians in the refugee camps, and I've spoken to Palestinians in the West Bank. And overwhelmingly, the opinion is we want a one-state solution and we want to live in peace with our Jewish neighbors. Okay, I'm going to leave you with an anecdote. I traveled to Palestine this summer. I was in the West Bank. And while I was there, I was in a cab and we were driving, I think it was in Ramallah, and we were talking about one-state solution and politics, and there's a lot of settlements there, and so we passed a settlement. And this Palestinian cab driver, he told me, one of the reasons I don't support a two-state solution is because you see the requirement of these settlers to leave. That's what Zionism does. When you look at the world through a racial lens, you force people to be forcibly relocated based on whether they're Arab or Jewish, just as happened throughout this conflict. I'm almost done.
2 minutes.
Okay, good. So he was telling me that's one of the reasons. One of the reasons is because these settlers will have to move. And he told me, there are settlers living in those settlements that were born in this land just like I was. Why should they have to move? I was stunned because these settlements are legal under international law, and this is a Palestinian. And I haven't even talked about, I don't have time right now to talk about all that the Palestinians in the West Bank go through under Israeli occupation. He has seen the dark side of Zionism. Meanwhile, there are Zionists on the left who are willing to expel these people from their homes for the sake of protecting Zionism, while a Palestinian who has seen the dark side of it cares more about their needs than supposed Zionists do, leftist Zionists at least. Now, when Zionism, an ideology created to protect the Jewish people, has come to a point where advocates of it, in the name of protecting Zionism, care less about the needs of Jews in that land than the people who have seen the dark side of Zionism themselves, the Palestinians, at least that Palestinian cab driver, I think it's safe to say that Zionism has failed. And that's why it has no purpose in a solution in this conflict, and without Zionism in the way, there's no reason for a one-state solution to not be implemented. Thank you.
Bassam, very well done. Thank you for contributing to the debate today. As those of you who have been here before know, that we normally meet down the other end of the park. That area was double booked by someone who overlooked the fact that we had it. We gave way to the other group, and that brings us down here today. Our next speaker And I also want to make mention that after Merle finishes speaking, it'll be open mic time. So anyone who has something, to contribute will have 2 minutes at the mic to say their piece. But our next speaker is Merle Terleski. He's a local conservative activist. He's run for office 3 times. He's demonstrated, whenever there's a demonstration of a decidedly left-wing nature, you can be sure that Merle will be there to make the conservative argument. As a Christian and a Zionist, he has a sincere interest in how the politics of the Middle East affect both that area and the rest of the world. And with no further ado, I give you Merle Terleski.
Well, thank you, everyone. I really want to personally thank Wissam for coming out. Wissam and I have met each other on several occasions, and I think it's always been respectful. I can say that for Wissam and most of his organization. Even though we've stood on the different sides of many events, we've always treated each other with respect, and I hope we can continue to do that. This today proves that it's possible. So, get a little away from the mic as well. Israel and Palestine, 2 ancient people, 2 ancient lands. And it really is true. We're not talking about a third people. We're talking essentially about cousins, people that date back for thousands of years. And in the words of Mahmoud Abbas, the leader of the Palestinian Authority, when he addressed the UN recently, he said, "We must have 2 peoples, 2 states, 2 lands." I agree with him. But the problem is that when Abbas says that with his right hand in a handshake, he slaps you across the face with the left hand by continually referring to the independence of Israel as the Nakba, the day of the catastrophe. I'm going to go into a little bit more about that later in my speech. But first of all, we have to really, if we're going to debate this issue, we have to decide what is Palestine and what is its people. Recently, looking at, I think pretty much everyone would respect Wikipedia's definitions mostly, and not all the time, but they describe Palestine on a number of terms. They call it Canaan, they call it Greater Israel, they call it the Holy Land, Judea, Kingdom of Israel, Kingdom of Jerusalem, Eretz Yisrael, which is in Hebrew. One could argue that in fact Palestine is actually Israel, if you go back in biblical terms in the Torah. The Torah, by the way, is a document that is believed in by both Jews and Muslims, even though Muslims today will discourse about certain sections of the Torah that don't fit their current ideology. Palestine can most recently be traced back, and Wissam mentioned it, to the 1920. There we go. Can be traced back most recently to the 1920 Franco-British Boundary Declaration. I would argue that that's only one of many attempts since Rome to carve up the Holy Land in people's different interests. We can refer back to the song I think we all know by Boney M. Some of the words go, when the wicked carried us away in captivity, required from us a song. Now how should we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? That's the Jewish population referring to the fact that they can't sing their song of their land somewhere else other than in their own homeland. And it puzzles me continually in this debate how, particularly in the left, that so many independent movements are celebrated and supported. But when it comes down to a Jewish homeland, it's called racist. And it really is something that quite unsettles me when it comes down to that. The Jews in what is now the state of Israel has had a link to the land for over 4,000 years. And ladies and gentlemen, we can choose to ignore it and go forward in a disastrous racist ideology that says that the Jews are Judaizing Jerusalem, which has come out of the mouth of Abbas recently. You can no more Judaize Jerusalem than you can Mexicanize a taco. It's that simple. The Jews, they recently found a coin buried under the first temple wall dating back with a picture of the menorah, I think that's how you call it, menorah, the candles, with the candles on there dating back over 1,500 years. These coins are continually found under the western wall, linking the Jewish, sorry, the mic keeps falling down, linking the Jewish people to the Jewish land. Now I'm not going to stand here today and say that the Arabs have no link to that land. I'll get into that a little later. They do. But I think you cannot continually erase and eradicate the Jewish link to the land. It's there. That's why they have Hanukkah. Even in the depths of Auschwitz, in the despair of having their brothers and sisters gassed and cremated, they celebrated with the menorah and lit the candle. Thousands of years of tradition survived even in those death camps, and I think that's important to remember. As we carry on through the Palestinian struggle, we came to the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which its political wing is Fatah, which is now the primary negotiating partner in the current round of negotiations in Israel. Many people refer to Oslo. What was Oslo? And I don't have enough time to get into entire aspects of Oslo, but the fundamental aspect of Oslo in 1993 with Rabin and Clinton and Yasser Arafat was to have the PLO renounce terrorism. That was the principal objective of Oslo, that you have to renounce terrorism and you have to recognize Israel. To this day, as long as Arafat was alive, he never completely penned it into form. He said he would, they kind of did, they kind of didn't. It's always this continual struggle by the Palestinian side to simply give recognition that the state of Israel was a Jewish state. He did release the documents of the PLO from being a terrorist organization, and that was at the time acceptable to Rabin. It was actually signed on the very last moment, only hours before it was supposed to expire. Rabin and Arafat rushed to the side with Clinton and signed it. That's Oslo. So fundamentally, before Oslo even existed, ladies and gentlemen, there was no two-state solution in the minds of the PLO. None. It called for the utter and complete destruction of the state of Israel. Not two states, destruction of the state of Israel. So Israel from time beginning has had to deal with partners that don't want to negotiate with them, but that want to destroy them. Oslo was an attempt to change that. You now have the Palestinian Authority. That was a result of the Oslo Agreement, that they would have a temporary setup of government elected by their own people. They had one election, I think, in the last 5 to 8 years. There hasn't been another election to elect a president of the Palestinian Authority other than Abbas. And Abbas is caught in a rather difficult situation. And I think it was summed up recently when I was attended outside an event that was put on by CPHR. I said, look at the West Bank and how much they're flourishing. I said to a young Arab fellow, I said, they got high-speed internet, they're doing electronic they're doing multi-partner electronics in the West Bank. They're bringing in high-speed internet, a whole bunch of different things that Gaza doesn't have, because they're actually negotiating and trying to find a settlement. The first words were out of his mouth were, they're treasonous, traitors for talking to Israel. Now we can take whatever position we want, ladies and gentlemen, but if that is the sum thought of a young Arab man living in Calgary, that it's even traitorous to even talk to Israel, which is the current position of Hamas, what way do we have to go forward? And it's always, they said about Arafat that he would extend with the olive branch but have the pistol on his side. So you never really were sure what you were going to get. But with the creation of Israel came a 6-day war where 6 countries ganged up on Israel and attempted to obliterate it. We are thankful, though, that they didn't succeed. Israel has only requested over time and time again that they be recognized as a state and that they be allowed to live within sovereign borders. Now, what does a state mean? Now, just a show of hands here. How many people in this sitting here right now would have been out of Canada to a different foreign country? I'd say the most of you. Now, you would probably agree with me that it is only natural, and it wouldn't be surprising to you when you arrive at that foreign country to produce some kind of identification. Right now, most of the time, it's a passport. Before, you used to be able to go to Cuba and Mexico with just a driver's license, but now it's passports. You wouldn't be shocked. You wouldn't go, oh my gosh, what do you mean a passport? I just want to come into your country. I have to have a passport? That doesn't seem unreliable or unfathomable that you have to produce a passport. But it seems to be a difficult precipice for the Palestinians living within the territories. Yes, there are borders, and yes, there are check stops, and there always will be. It's for 2 reasons. The state of Israel is defined like any other nation. Its flag flies at the UN. The Palestinians are now named as a state, semi-state in the UN, that they have the right to protect their citizens. And in order to protect your citizens, you have to have borders. You have to have check stops. You can't just open up the door and say anyone come in anytime you want. Israel, and this, I tried to politely explain this to an Arab friend at the university recently. And it kind of stems from what you're talking about, have a secular Arab state. I think in the minds of any Jew in Israel today, first or second generation, they will never, ever, 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 at any time ever again, put their security into the hands of any other nation but their own. And why is that? It is because of something that many Arab writers, including the boss who wrote a thesis on denying the Holocaust, it is because 6 million of them were gassed and cremated in the ovens in Auschwitz and throughout the Nazi concentration camps. That is why the current state of Israel will never rely on anyone else to protect their security. Because even the allies that I support, Britain, France, did nothing. Yes, they fought in Hitler Germany, but they did nothing to stop that slaughter from happening. Even after numerous prisoners were escaping from the camps, telling the world what was going on, they still stood by. So that is why today Israel must have borders, it must have security, and it must have sovereignty. We'll probably differ a lot on the historical link of the Jews to the land. I am a believer in both the Torah and the New Testament, and whether you even believe that Jesus is the Messiah or not, whether you believe that God is the creator of the earth, the Torah is a historic document. It is a document that is well respected across the world. The Torah, when I say the Torah, I'm talking about the Old Testament of the Bible, the first 12 books. It mentions Israel 2,200 times. 2,200 times the word Israel is mentioned in the Torah. I'm sorry to say the word Palestine is not mentioned once. That's because it didn't exist then. Israel has been concessionary. They will continue to be concessionary to what essentially is their cousins, ladies and gentlemen. And this came out of the mouths of an Israeli soldier as he stood outside of Bethlehem. We remember the siege of Bethlehem a few years ago. A reporter asked him, "What do you think about this conflict?" And he didn't chuckle. He had a bit of a smile on his face. He says, "It's a family affair." He said, "It always has been." Family affair, if you don't know what I mean, the descendants essentially of the Arab population today are the descendants both of Abraham. The Arabs being the descendants of Ishmael, the Jews being descendants of Isaac. So essentially you're having two cousins fighting over the same piece of land for the last 3,000 years. I would agree though with my previous speaker that we must find a solution to this. The Jews today living in Israel can no longer withstand having thousands of rockets fired into their homeland from the independent source. That was prior to the first cast lead. Over 1,200 rockets, ladies and gentlemen, were fired from an area that wants to have recognition, wants to have a state, firing them into another state. And Israel finally said enough is enough, and they responded with cast lead. And I said, you know, recently at the film they had on the 5 cameras, and when I watched the IDF go in and take people out of their homes at 4 o'clock in the morning with my IDF shirt on, I had to say even at that time I wasn't proud of my partners in the IDF and what they were doing. I'm a personal respecter for private property. I think you have to have warrants, you have to have legitimate rights and means to go in and take someone out of their house and remove them. It wasn't the right thing to do. There's plenty of wrong things that have been done in this conflict, ladies and gentlemen. And what really, at times, when I listened to the boss speech reaching out for a 2-state solution, not once in his entire speech, and I've listened to it twice, did he acknowledge any crimes on the part of the Palestinian organizations, both Fatah and Hamas. Not once. The 100 prisoners that are being released as part of the current negotiations, I think there's supposed to be 200 of them released before the 9 months are up. There's a chronology of what these people were charged with. And believe me, they weren't charged with taking a chocolate bar out of a store in Tel Aviv. One of them, who worked for a Jewish employer, decided one day to come up to his Jewish employer and implant an axe in the back of his head. It was continuous crimes like this. The killing of their Jewish neighbors, the killing of their Jewish employers, Jewish teachers. On and on the list went. But if that's not a big enough slap in the face that Israel would actually release these people in concession for peace, what does the boss do? What does the leader of the Palestinian Authority do when these people are released? They're welcomed back to Ramallah as heroes. Heroes of the Palestinian cause, ladies and gentlemen. And I would go so far as to say, if those are your heroes that are able to put an axe into the back of the head of a Jewish man and employer, we have a long ways to go, ladies and gentlemen. A long ways to go before we find 2 states that can agree to each other in peace. And am I going to stand here today and say that everything and anything the IDF has done has been right? No, it hasn't. You're living in a conflict that has been going on for hundreds of years. But you know, if I was to stand here about this far away and take a rock about this size of my hand and began pummeling him at Wissam, I don't think he would say that's not an attack. I don't think he'd stand there and say, go ahead, throw rocks at me. No, a rock planted in the right place at the right time could knock Wissam unconscious or dead. And I would never do that. But we have to realize that even though Palestinian youths are just standing there throwing boulder-sized rocks at people, it's still a weapon. And this conflict is going to continue until one thing that the Palestinians come to a realization of, that the Jews of Israel are not going to leave. They're not going anywhere. They're not going back to Europe, as some supremacists in the Palestinian movement suggest. They're not going back anywhere else on this God-created earth, but right where they are. And I think we have to accept the fact that a large majority of the Palestinians that are there are going to be there as well. So how do we find a way for both of those people to live on a piece of land and live in peace? If I had the magic solution to that, I think we wouldn't even have to be debating to this. I don't have a magic solution. I do support the two-state theory. I think it's the only way to really approach that. I'm sorry, Wissam, I can't. How much time do I have left? Five. I cannot support a one-state solution because I think it's a slap in the face to the independence and the rights of the Jewish people to a state. There are hundreds of Jewish states that surround Israel today. And with all due respect, Israel doesn't need to be led and controlled under another Arab theocracy. If we're going to talk about a single Arab state, who is going to protect minority rights in that state? And I asked one of the members of SPHR, who is going to protect those rights? And one of the fellows said to me, the UN will do it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the UN doesn't have a great track record about defending minority rights. Rwanda was one of them, where the UN did nothing while Tutsi and Sunni slaughtered each other. Egypt today, the UN isn't even there, and even if they were there, I wouldn't be convinced that they could protect Coptic Christians living in Egypt, whose churches are being burned to the ground. Christians throughout Arab countries in the world today are being persecuted, killed, slaughtered for their faith. And we're going to allow it's true, and we're going to allow the UN to defend the minority rights. There is no reason on this earth why the Jews should have to be subjected yet again to another ruler, whether it be Rome, whether it be Britain, any other country. They have a right to a land, they have a right to a peace, they have a right to sovereign borders. And the debate is going to be how to define those borders. And it just, as long as, and Abbas actually recently admitted to the fact that they have to begin changing the school books that are being taught in the West Bank that describe Jews as pigs in the school books that are taught in the West. He actually admitted that yes, we have to rewrite the school books. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot continue on a road to peace. I cannot make peace, and the only way I could make some peace with Wissam is if I actually respect him as a human being. How am I to even talk about something if I refuse to even recognize the right that he has the right to even stand in front of me, or even to exist for that matter? Abbas says, call yourselves whatever you want. It's not up to us when talking about respect and recognition for Israel. They want to be called a Palestinian state. They want the world to recognize that they're a Palestinian state of Palestinians. But they can't say that Israel is a Jewish state and respect that. You cannot negotiate with someone, people, if you cannot even accept the fact that they have a right to exist. And as much as Wissam and I may disagree on matters, he has every right to put forward his principles just as much as I do. And when that type of sentiment comes true in the Middle East, when there's a leader amongst the Arab people that comes forward and says, the Jews are here, we're here, we got to find a reason to live together, then I think there's going to be peace. Until then, we're going to continue throwing stones at each other and rockets.
2 minutes.
And I think that's about it. I take it more on a personal level. I don't have a 5-year university degree on this issue. I've actually never been to the Middle East. I've tried to educate myself personally on the issues as much as I can, and I've learned something from time to time from my Arab friends here. My ideas have changed over the past few years, but I will always hold true that the Jews are there. They've been there for 4,000 years. There has to be a way and a means to find for these two peoples to live together, as we do here in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Merle, for your articulate defense of the State of Israel. Okay, we agreed earlier that there would be a 3-minute rebuttal by each of the speakers today to what the other said. We're going to do that, and then we're going to get on with the open mic. Okay, so Wissam, again, I invite you to the mic. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. So I only have 3 minutes, and it's tough to rebut a 20-minute speech in that time, but I'm going to quickly go over these things. First of all, when we talk about Zionism being a racist ideology as a opposed to supporting Palestinian movements. The difference is that the Palestinians right now are not calling for their national movement to be to the exclusion of anybody else. Right now, what Zionism is calling for is for the entirety of the Israeli state to be Jewish, while there are Palestinian refugees who, because of that statement, because of that ideology, are not allowed to return to their land because they're Palestinian. What we're talking about with the one-state solution is a binational state, respect and rights for both people. Okay, and we have examples of states like this that have worked. Canada is a good one. We have well, technically 3 official nations here, okay, and they live together and their rights are respected. This is the framework that one-state solution is talking about. Okay, and Palestinians, remember, are actually offering a solution. I didn't hear Merle offer a solution. It was very pessimistic. Palestinians are offering a solution and are willing to go through with it. Okay, they want a binational state with, and in such a state, both sides would have to be protected. And of course, there's the question of violence. And obviously, this is a conflict. Violence is part of a conflict. And on both sides, there has been violence in this conflict. So that's something that will have to be resolved in any solution, whether you go with one state or 2 state. They're going to have to live together, either in one nation or as state neighbors. So the violence is going to have to end in any solution. Any solution that doesn't end that is no solution at all. Okay. Just quickly, you were talking about Hamas's statements about Judaizing Jerusalem. Abbas' statement about that.
Before you say anything, I happen to have their charter in my hands, so be very, very careful.
Okay, sir, please.
No, sorry, I meant Abbas. I'm going to talk about Hamas too, and I hope you have that charter handy. But on Abbas, one thing that's, when he's talking about Judaizing Jerusalem, what he's talking about is Israel's program of home demolitions, and this is something that's been implemented in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, since 1967. And quick statistic on that since 1993 alone, Israel has demolished 1,600 Arab homes in East Jerusalem. That's what he's talking about when he's talking about Judaizing East Jerusalem. And that's on top of, since 1993, in the whole of the West Bank, 15,000 Palestinian homes and other structures have been demolished by Israel. This is what we were talking about in terms of Judaizing, because these places are being demolished to make room for more settlements or just to expel Arabs. Again, it comes down to that demographic threat, the notion that Israel must be a state for Jews to the exclusion of Arabs living there. That's what we're talking about. Finally, about, you hear this argument a lot. 1 minute, okay. You hear this argument a lot, the Palestinians don't want to negotiate. They don't want peace. Well, Arafat actually did recognize Israel's right to exist. I don't know where that notion is coming from. In 1998, December 1998, Arafat acknowledged during negotiations, he actually did it. He acknowledged Israel's right to exist with secure state borders, and he had the support of the entire Palestinian National Council behind him. That's a sort of legislative body of the world's Palestinians. He had the support of the Palestinian National Council and acknowledged Israel's right to exist, and that's what they approached the Oslo agreements with, and also with secure borders, implying that, even just the notion of acknowledging Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state is basically validating the entire ethnic cleansing that happened in 1948. And this is why Palestinians have been so reluctant and have considered it political suicide to do so. But Yasser Arafat did it. He still did that in 1998. And during the Oslo years, what was he rewarded with? During the Oslo years, 7,000 plus Palestinians killed by Israeli forces, 12,000 Palestinian homes destroyed, 250,000 more settlers placed in the West Bank. That's what Arafat was rewarded with. Finally, about Hamas, because I did promise that I was going to talk to you about it. Just very quickly, I'm going to say a couple of statements. Now, I'm not a supporter of Hamas. Frankly, I think they're idiots because of their internal Sharia policy. But in terms of their foreign policy to Israel, you have to be fair. Here the charter says some ridiculous stuff, and that was written in the 1980s. And, one commentator has actually said that Hamas's critics are more familiar with its own charter than its members. And here's why they say that. Statements by Hamas officials that have shown they are clearly moving towards accepting Israel's right to exist. In 2005, Mohammed Ghazza, the Hamas official, said the charter is not the Quran, meaning it's not infallible. Historically, we believe all Palestinians belong to Palestinians, but we're talking now about reality, about political solutions. The realities are different. I don't think there will be a problem of negotiating with the Israelis. In 2006, CNN reported that a spokesman for the Hamas government, Mahmoud Zahar, even mentioned the possibility of a 2-state solution in which Palestinians have, quote, quote, freedom and independence side by side with our neighbors. In April 2008, Khalid Mash'al of Hamas said Hamas would accept the result of any referendum of Palestinians that decided to accept Israel's existence, including some land taken in the 1967 war. That means including in the occupied Palestinian territories. In January 2009, Ghazi Hamid of Hamas said, we accept a state in the 67 borders. We are not talking about the destruction of Israel. And on 11th of May of 2011, Hamas's foreign minister said he accepted the 1967 borders as the borders of an Israeli state, implying Israel existing on the rest of its current territory. Right? This is Hamas. This is supposedly the most extreme group in the Palestinian territories. And as I said, when we're talking about rockets, there's a complex, I don't really have the time to go into it, but
No, you
the
don't.
head of the
No,
Mossad...
no, you don't. No, you don't.
Okay, all right. Well, that's that.
I'm suggesting a 5-minute rebuttal.
You take it 5.
Okay,
You're done.
I have spoken, 5 minutes each.
Yeah.
3 is not
And-
enough for rebuttal, guys.
Okay.
Sorry, I hate to be a...
And because he did have 5 minutes, Merle was automatically going to have 5 minutes. So,
Yes.
Merle, over to you.
You have 5 already, though?
Okay, a couple things. I hope I didn't sound pessimistic. I think I'm rather optimistic about the future. I think that the deal that happened with Syria giving up its chemical weapons is a new sign of relief for the Middle East. A phone call between Obama and the current Prime Minister of Iran, the first time in 30 years these two people have spoken. So there is hope and peace in the Middle East. Why though, am I a little shaken about why it's going to happen? Wissam is right. I've heard those quotes recently from Hamas. They have been made. I can only hope that they're serious about it. I can only hope that perhaps Hamas has come to some realization that the map that used to be on the wall behind Yasser Arafat, that was simply called Palestine from the Jordan to the sea, that didn't have any Israel in it whatsoever, is not the type of future that they want to see or they think is realizable. Because that is not going to happen. Arafat used to do a chant, 1 million martyrs to Jerusalem. In other words, as many as we have to lose, as many as we have to die to achieve from the Jordan to the sea. The map was on the wall behind them, and that's why I think Israelis and myself are a bit pessimistic. But as I stated before, we have two peoples in an area that is a quarter the size of almost of Calgary. They're going to have to find some way to coexist. I'm not convinced, Wissam, on a one state. First of all, I don't think it's something the Israeli government or the Israeli people put to a referendum would ever agree to. And I think any final agreement will come to a referendum amongst the Palestinian population and the Jewish population. The right of return, I never got into the right of return when I spoke. Simply, it's not feasible. Abbas himself actually hinted to it. He retracted by saying he meant to say, I'm not going to return to my own individual house. But I think even Abbas is beginning to realize that the idea of flooding Israel with 4 million Arabs and basically nullifying the Jewish majority in the country is not going to happen. And I think I have to again go back to what I was saying earlier as to why the Jewish majority in Israel are never ever going to allow themselves to be in a minority position in their own land to be controlled by someone else. Because I'm not saying that every Arab around this debate is in favor of another Holocaust. But we all know the words that came out of the mouths of previous leader of Iran, Ahmadinejad. And we can continue to say it was mistranslation. I had a young Muslim brother recently tell me he meant to say we're not sure it was 6 million. Well, fair enough. Maybe it wasn't 6 million. I think it was, but maybe it wasn't. But did it actually happen? And I have to say, even with the current Prime Minister of Iran, when he came out and was asked about the Holocaust, his first sentence was, I'm not a historian. Well, neither am I. I don't have a university degree, and I can stand here quite steadfastly and say the Holocaust did happen. It was a deliberate attempt to rid all of Europe of the Jewry, and it happened. Why do you have to preface it with, I'm not a historian? That's basically saying you're not quite sure of yourself of saying whether the Holocaust happened. I bring that back to the state of Israel because, once again, they are not going to allow themselves to be subjected by any other majority other than themselves. I think they have a right to it. I think they have a 4,000-year history to that land that dates back to the first temple, King David. The history books are there. It's clear. You know, and I try to stay away from, how much? 1 minute? 2 minutes. There's a document on Google you can find actually that states that it was actually the Palestinian Liberation Organization that created the notion of a Palestinian state in the 1970s. And I mean this with all due respect, ladies and gentlemen, because if you're going to have a Palestinian nation, you would think the leader would be led by a Palestinian. Yasser Arafat was born in Cairo, Egypt. So there's another whole debate about the actual reality. He was born in Cairo, Egypt. About the reality of a nation status of over thousands of years called Palestinian. There actually is no Palestinian language. They speak Arabic. So, but you know, I think Israel, in its concessionary mind, in its hope to achieve peace, has accepted the fact there is a group of people that are recognized as Palestinians, and we have to make peace with them. That's ultimately what it comes down to. We can argue till the cows come home as to whether or not Palestinians have been there as long as the Jews have. I would argue that even Al-Aqsa Mosque was built 1,200 years after the existence of the first and second temple. There was no Al-Aqsa Mosque when King David was there. It didn't exist. So you really can't deny these type of historical realities of the Jewish link to the land. And that's where I'm pessimistic, is the complete and utter refusal by Arab partners to recognize the right of the Jews to the land. And until we can find a middle on that area, you're not going to find peace.
Well done. Well, that brings us to the end of our official public debate by our speakers who are here to speak to the issues. We have an open mic time now, where anyone who wants to speak to the issue has 2 minutes, by my watch, to address the issue either pro or con. The mic is open. Please introduce yourself and keep it respectful, please. Of course you will. I know you will. There you go.
My name is Fuad. I'm Palestinian. I was born in Haifa in 1948. My question is for Merle. When you compare the settlements and Palestinians having to show their IDs to the passport situation when I come into Canada. Now, I don't know if you know this, but none of the checkpoints are on the border between the West Bank and Israel. They're all within the West Bank. So the comparison is more like if I want to walk from here to downtown, I have to go through a checkpoint and show my passport. Now you say you haven't been to Palestine. Maybe it's time you took a trip there and went through the checkpoint. With your Canadian passport, they'll wave you right through. But if you are Palestinian, you have to line up for hours and at the whims of young Israeli soldiers. I think it will open your mind a bit if you do go and see the West Bank.
I'll give a quick sound, and if the sound comes, you give response. You're right. You're right. There are two different types of borders in Israel. There are borders between in the middle of the West Bank, and there's general Israeli borders if you arrive at the Ben Gurion airport. That is, I hope one day we're going to not have those borders. I hope that they're not going to be there. There'll be some type of borders between the new Palestinian homeland and the Israeli current. The problem is, my friend, is recently two Arab youth, well, it's true, they went into a settlement, they decapitated the baby, and stabbed the settlement mother and father in the head several times, and in front of the judge they said, we are happy that we did it, and we'll do it again. This one. Now, am I saying that any of you here support that? No, I'm not saying that, but that is a reality of what people in Israel face. When these young men go in there and slaughter a newborn baby just because it's a Jew, you have to have some type of control. They're continually found with knives, they're continually found with explosives. The reason why they're not giving all this stuff into Gaza anymore is they're worried that Hamas will use it to make bombs and rockets. If they were convinced they were just going to rebuild schools, they would allow them to do it. But still, the supplies go in there. So until they completely and utterly reject violence against Jews, you're going to have these type of border situations.
Your name is?
My name is Corner Calgary. I just
Laura.
have a quick question. Maybe they don't want to give them that because of rockets or whatever, because they're going to build rockets. Can I ask why they won't allow them chocolate and all these wonderful things?
Let her, he can have a chance to rebuttal.
Go ahead. That's a good question, Mom. Yes, Mom. Okay, so I want to address, well, that's an important question. What she's referring to is, I believe they actually lifted that restriction, but before the Mavi Marmara incident, it was restrictions on imports into Gaza were on a lot more things than just cement. There was, and the list would change, but generally it included things like coffee, chocolate, pasta, and basic things like that, as well as a lot of other things, right? So that's what she's referring to. On the question of the violence, obviously there's violence being perpetrated on both sides. This is, like I said, what a conflict is, and let's not forget that there is violence that is perpetrated on the other side as well. I'm going to bring up the Hebron Mosque Massacre. The Hebron Mosque Massacre in 1993, when a Jewish settler walked into the Ibrahimi Mosque in Hebron and with an assault rifle, I think it was an automatic rifle, and mowed down about over 30 Palestinians and injured almost 100, I believe. This was in 1993. So that happens on both sides, right? And I just want to talk about, if you're talking about recently, and again, the argument that I'm getting from you is that Palestinians aren't genuine, they don't really want peace. Here's some statistics about the recent, what's happened since the recent peace negotiations or whatever that John Kerry went over there and started. So from August 1st, and I have it until the 23rd of September here when this was published. So there were 7 Palestinian civilians killed by Israeli forces during those peace talks, as opposed to the 2 Israeli soldiers killed by Palestinians. We heard about that a couple weeks ago. Okay, there were 68 Palestinian civilians injured by Israeli forces, including 12 children. 2 Israelis injured by Palestinians. Over 300 Palestinians detained by Israeli forces. 0 Israelis detained by Palestinians, of course. That includes 46 Palestinian children, by the way. There's a lot here. Over 300 Israeli military incursions into the occupied Palestinian territories, including 9 into Gaza. 45 Palestinian homes demolished. That's like within the last 2 months, by the way.
Wissam, you understand you're restricted to 2 minutes
has
as
it been
well?
2 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay,
it's
cool.
getting close.
It's getting close. Okay, well, that's why you're here. Okay, well, sorry, there's a lot of information. Is my 2 minutes up yet?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. And, I'm sorry I forget your name? Adele. Is a former president of the NPHR.
Just say your name again. Say your name again.
NPHR. You know what I'm talking about.
I will say my name. I just wanted to say, first, I want to apologize to all the inappropriate comments that were made. And I can't speak on behalf of the other side, and you can obviously tell what side I'm on, but I just want to apologize on behalf of everybody in SPHR, and I can't represent Palestinians, but I will apologize on their behalf. The second thing is I am the former president of Solidarity for Palestinian Human Rights, who's a campus organization that just advocates for human rights and talks about the conflict politically, socially, and culturally. And all I want to say, I'm not here to give a political talk. All I'm here to give is just a humanistic perspective. And I'm sure, we're all humans and we all know what it's like to just want to live. So all I'm going to say is I was in Palestine about 3 years ago, which was the first time. I was born in Kuwait from a Palestinian family, was discriminated against everywhere. We have a Jordanian passport, and we've never been able to have anything that is Palestinian, except the fact that we are Palestinian. And we came to Canada and we got the Canadian citizenship, and that allowed us to go into Palestine finally. And I'm not going to sit here and describe my experience in Palestine because nothing is like going there and seeing it for yourself, and also Israel, which I've been to. And when I speak to the other side and they say, there's no apartheid, there's no discrimination, we don't kill your children, we don't kill you, all I can say is, what does it mean for you to live, and what does it mean for you to die? And I'm not just giving pretty words, I'm giving a personal experience, and I'm not here just to share it, just to feel better.
30 seconds.
All I'm sharing it for is because I'm a Palestinian, a proud Palestinian who is ready to die this moment.
Thank you. Mike is yours.
My name's Ryan Belrose.
You can pull it up if you want.
Yeah, it's a little easier.
Hold it up, yeah.
I'm a Métis from Northern Alberta, and I've always just kind of wondered why it is that everybody talks about human rights when it comes to the Palestinians, and they completely ignore it when it comes to the Jews.
Yes. Right on.
That was brief. Anyone else like to take the mic?
He gave me one example. I asked him for a specific example of something like that, and he said, how can you consider them refugees after 65 years? Well, first of all, a lot of them are the same people that were expelled. Secondly, the United Nations still recognizes these people as refugees, and there's the United Nations has said, whatever, it's said that the Palestinian refugee conflict is basically unlike any other conflict. And in terms of that, I just want to say, like, this is sort of a shot at Zionism, but if you're going to talk about Jews having a connection to the land from thousands of years ago, 65 years is, well, nothing compared to that. So, there's a bit of a double standard there. That's my only point.
Okay, one more. Yeah.
Really quick.
You have a minute and 45 seconds left.
The reason that we bring up the indigenous rights when it comes to the Jewish rights to their homeland. Sorry. The reason that we bring up indigenous rights when we talk about the Jewish rights to their homeland is because it does date back 4,000 years. There's no such thing as a statute of limitations on indigenous rights. You will never be indigenous to Canada. I am indigenous to Canada. That's how it works. In 1,000 years, your family will still not be indigenous to Canada. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is.
Anyone else like their 2 minutes? No, Bill.
Here has been waiting patiently.
Bill has been waiting patiently. And I've been going over 2 minutes for everybody, so 2.5. Okay. Enjoy yourself.
I could probably
It's not
sum it up
easy,
quicker.
is it?
No, it's not.
I'll have to ask someone for a little help on the pronunciation of this word. What's the proper pronunciation of that? Takia? Takia. Takia is a word that describes something that's written in the Quran, 3.28, which basically adherents may conceal their religion when they're under threat or persecution and conclusion. What that really means is that in the Muslim religion, according to the Quran, you can lie to protect yourself, to protect your religion, to protect your family, whatever, to infidels. An infidel is a person, any person that's a non-believer. So truthfully, starting any debate with anyone of the Muslim faith, using this, I have to go in with a certain amount of skepticism. You're talking about Hebron, the massacre at Hebron. The Israeli that committed that atrocity ended up in jail. When the shoe's on the other foot,
That's not true.
pardon?
Enough. You'll have, sir. You'll have your opportunity if
Sorry,
you want it.
was he killed? Okay, I was led to believe that he was in prison. However, if the fact was, if he was arrested after that atrocity, he wouldn't have been celebrated as a national hero.
It's like,
Right now, you have Palestinians, so-called, you have Arabs of Palestinian description, committing atrocities all over the Middle East, and they're celebrated. In Gaza, the city that can't get chocolate or sugar gives cakes in the marketplace after every sort of a terrorist act that goes on in the free country. After 9/11, the place was packed for 3 days. After Boston, it was packed. Stopping cars in the street, handing out celebratory cakes, celebratory candies, based on the fact that they were desecrating non-believers. So I'm sorry. I feel for the Muslim people. I feel for the Palestinian people. But the fact of the matter is, 75% of Palestine, after it was carved up, ended up in Jordan. Is anybody over there protesting Jordan? No, you're protesting the Jews. You're protesting against the Jews. We go to Hamas, right in their doctrine, you're saying, well, they don't go by their constitution anymore. It says in there, specifically, that they are to annihilate. They recognize the fact that the Israeli state, until Islam wipes them out. You go to any organization right now, from the Muslim Brotherhood right through Al-Qaeda, any of them, they only have one goal. And that's the implementation. It's true. But what the fact of the matter is, whether they're all Muslims or not, the fundamentalists are still the ones that are massacring. And you can't tell me that with the threat that they're posing to their own people, that they're not eventually going to end up in some sort of Palestinian state and enforce the Sharia law.
Time.
Which is totally disgusting.
Thanks, Bill.
And I'll love a rebuttal on this one.
Feel free to rebut. Get behind the mic and rebut. Okay.
Maybe you should check your facts. The guy who walked into the Hebron mosque was an American Israeli. He was an American doctor who immigrated to Israel. He's from California. His name is Baruch Goldstein. He did not go to jail. He was killed by the people he was trying to shoot. And today, if you go to Hebron, there is a memorial for him where they consider him as a hero. You should go check that. Google.
That's a lie. He has been.
Google.
You guys can keep telling lies all you want.
Just Google.
Google it, because you'll find out it's a lie.
My friend.
It's illegal. It's illegal under Israeli state law.
You guys can rebuttal, just let him have his say, okay? Then you can rebut.
All I'm asking you, if you want to get the fact, just go Google Baruch Goldstein.
The way he did
and
business.
you will find out whether he did spend time in Israeli jail and whether there is a memorial for him as a hero.
Bill, you're up.
Okay, sorry, I do apologize.
Again, this time you are restricted
I
to
am
2 minutes.
restricted.
Okay?
I do apologize, but the fact of the matter is, I did retort, and I said that if he would have been arrested, he would have gone to jail. At no point is any sort of a terrorist act against Palestinians, blatant, without retaliation, accepted as any sort of hero's welcome. It just does not happen. The fact of the matter is, I did change my fact. Everybody understand that? He was shot. Okay? He wasn't jailed, but he would have been.
Merle.
He would have been.
You've had lots of opportunity.
No, I'll be really quick. The Goldstein thing, as far as I know, he was killed. And I really, my friends, I really want to ask you in sincerity on this, my Muslim Arab friends that are here today. Are you not knowledgeable of the fact of what goes on in Gaza? I am. I've never, it's public knowledge that during the suicide missions, and their homicidal suicide missions, when you walk into a cafe with a suicide belt on and kill 50 people, I know you don't support that with some, I know you don't, you never have, but that is a homicidal attack on innocent civilians. And if any of you can today tell me that those little cookies and baseball cards made of suicide bombers, Shaheed, is not happening in Gaza, you need to seriously give yourself a reality check. Okay, I'm not saying SPHR supports that, but it goes on. It's common knowledge that these people are heroes. They're called Shaheed. That's like comparing them to Martin Luther King. You are not Shaheed when you walk into a cafe and kill 20 Israelis, whether they be Jews or Arabs. It's murder. Now you can fly back and say what the Israelis are doing, that's fine. And I've said before that I stood with my IDF shirt and wasn't proud of everything they're doing. But this type of blatant hero worship of people that murder innocent civilians, whether it be in the name of the Quran, whether it be in the name of Hamas, and people in Gaza pass out little cakes, and the mother says he is gone to Allah, you cannot celebrate that. You cannot, because if you do, there will never be peace in the Middle East, ladies and gentlemen. You have to have a universal respect for human rights and a universal respect for personhood. And celebrating by calling someone who is a homicidal maniac a Shaheed is just not right.
Like 1 minute, 30 seconds. Very good. Mama. Oh, not Mama.
Okay, I think I'm the only Jew in the crowd, so I thought I would
No, you're not.
say something. Am I not? Okay, good. You know, one thing is I always think it's dangerous to, and with respect to Islam, to vilify so strongly the other side. I'm a Zionist. I go to Jerusalem all the time. Lots of Palestinian friends, lots of Israeli friends, and I'm not racist. I'm not, at least I don't think I'm racist. And, you know, if I look at the Zionist movement, I look at Theodor Herzl, who was talking about freeing black slaves from Africa during his lifetime. And I look at Haj Amin al-Husseini, the Palestinian national movement leader, who was on Berlin radio, not just talking about Jews in Palestine, saying kill Jews everywhere, kill them everywhere you find them. That's almost a direct quote. So I find that, and every time I come to one of these events, I'm usually pretty quiet, not always, but I'm usually pretty quiet, and I always have someone whisper something racist in my ear, like, you Jew, hope the Nazis kill your family, would have finished your family. I always do, and I've been going to these things you probably recognize me, I've been going to these things for many years. So it's, when I hear that that my side is the racist, if there's anything wrong, I would for sure condemn it. But I have to say, when I look at the history of it, when I look at, forget about when Zionism started in 1834, when there was a one-state solution, when there was, they called it a Sanjak, part of the Ottoman Empire. The Jews were massacred in Hebron and Jerusalem in 1834, not 1929. That was after Zionism. 1834. There's always been hate and persecution of Jews in the Middle East, going back to 1066 in Fez, Morocco. And Jews, after all this, thought that they needed a homeland of their own. And, painting these refugees who joined their persecuted brothers as racist and racist ideology, it's like I feel a kick in the stomach every time I hear it. I don't think it's accurate, and I don't think it represents Judaism, and I don't think it represents Zionism. I'm sorry. And the vilification, I think, is dangerous for our Jewish community here, and for just for community relations. I just don't think it's helpful.
And that was exactly 2 minutes. Good job. Okay, a couple words right here.
So I am an Israeli citizen. I'm a Canadian citizen as well. And
I knew there was another Jew here today.
Yeah,
had to be.
But I am ashamed by some of the things that are happening in the Middle East, also on the Israeli side, and I will tell you why. Somebody was talking here about Palestinians wanting to kill all the Jews, and Jews being innocent victims, and all this striving for peace and so on. This is absolutely wrong. I think at least once during that period when Yitzhak Rabin was the Prime Minister of Israel, Israel was offered a package deal by, I'm not sure about the facts, but it did happen. It was a deal offered by Saudi Arabia and Qatar, with the United States standing up as a sponsor of this whole thing. And Israel, it was a package deal. Israel was offered to go back to the safe borders of 1967, plus some territories on the what is called occupied West Bank. Then Israel was offered, as a part of that deal, Israel was offered diplomatic relations with all the Arab countries, and so on and so forth. There was a huge list, and Israel rejected that deal. And I think that that happened not once. That happened again a few years ago when Mahmoud Abbas and when Netanyahu was already the prime minister, they negotiated another deal which implied permanent borders, but Israel rejected it again. And then my rhetorical question is why Israel is still building the settlements in the occupied territories. Every day there are new houses being built there. If you are seriously, genuinely, if your intention is peace, why would you be doing that? Israel doesn't want any peace. Israel wants the occupied territories, full stop. This is what Israel wants. And this is their goal. And in the end, there is a law being contemplated right now in the Israeli right wing. The goal of that law is to annex the occupied West Bank. And I have no idea what will happen after that. Maybe the Arabs who live on the occupied West Bank will be offered some compensation and then will be offered to move out. I have no idea. But it's like the reason why I'm talking about this, because Israeli government policies, extremely right-wing, extremely foolish and stupid, are against the best interests of the Jewish people as well. This is why I'm saying that. And I am tired of listening to that pro-Israel propaganda, partly because it's, I would say, semi-Christian, semi-ignorant, presented by semi.
And your time is up, sir. Thank you very much. Now, we're going to shut down the open mic, but we're going to have 2 5-minute closing arguments by our speakers today. We're running out of time here. Wissam, go for it.
First of all, I want to sincerely apologize to anyone who at any of our events or any other Palestine-related events have had any anti-Semitic or any racist statements at all said against them, and we don't stand with that. And people who genuinely understand what this struggle is about don't stand with that. Okay. On that note, I want to first point out that as a Muslim, I was pretty much just about 5 minutes ago called an automatic liar and untrustable because of my faith. That is a hate crime under Canadian law, and that is something that is not uncommon at these events either. So don't say that this is a one-sided thing. That happens on both sides, and there are, I'm trying to be diplomatic here, but there are people like that on both sides. Now, about the Goldstein thing, I just want to set that question to rest. Baruch Goldstein walked into the Hebron Mosque. He killed however many Palestinians, and he was beaten to death right then and there. Now, he knew when he was going into that mosque, he wasn't coming out alive. That was a suicide attack. Okay? And when he was killed, there was a funeral procession for him with 1,000 people in attendance in Israel. Okay? So there was celebration. I don't know about the thing in Hebron, but there was celebration of that. Okay, if it's illegal now, great. Okay, now I want to note, because there have been a lot of things about a lot of statements about Palestinian suicide bombers and all the horrible things that Palestinians do, and they are done. But you have to look at them within the context. The Palestinians have been so brutalized. They are basically caged up. You're talking about Gaza. You're talking about a tiny country, mostly filled with refugees that have come from Israel, that is under blockade, under military occupation, and they're treated like animals. The poverty rate in Gaza is pushing 40%. Before Cast Lead, it was I believe it was pushing 70. Okay, you cage these people. You treat them like animals. Of course, they're going to react. The solution is not to tighten the cage. The solution is to give them the rights, to let them free. Okay, and however you do that, it has to be done fairly. And there's been a lot of arguments about this. I think I've proven that it's not just that the Israeli side is just as responsible for not having a solution to this. I want to point out one thing about this in relation to Goldstein. Okay, that attack. You've done your research on Islamic theology. Clearly, do you know how long the waiting period, the mourning period, is in Islam? The period of mourning after someone dies. Yeah, but the period of mourning lasts about 40 days. 40 days exactly, according to Islamic law. Okay, so the very first Palestinian suicide bombing in Israel was committed by Hamas exactly 40 days after the Goldstein attack. And this is what the Palestinian resistance is all about. Okay, there were suicide attacks, but not a suicide bombing. That was the first one. Okay, inside of Israel was 40 days after. They were sending a clear message. This was in response to an Israeli aggression. And most Palestinians, what they have done has been in response to Israeli aggression that started in 1948 with the expulsion of them from their land. I don't want to end on a negative note, and I've been hoping to use this quote at the end of this, so I'm going to leave you with this. This is a quote from Miko Peled. He is an Israeli Jew. His father was a general in the IDF. He was actually a general during the 1967 war. He had a long military career. Miko Peled himself lost a niece in a Palestinian suicide bombing in Jerusalem. She was 13 years old. If someone like that can be brought around to accept that Palestinians will buy peace with the Jews and that they can live together in a one-state solution, I have faith that pretty much anybody can. And he does support a one-state solution. I'm going to shamelessly plug that we have an event coming up with him in about on October 8th. So, ask me about that. Yeah, so we're bringing him. Here's the quote. Why does he support this? Here's his quote. Zionism, just like racism, has to go. The Zionist state has to be replaced with a democracy and equal rights. We have 5.5 million Palestinians, about 6.5 million Israelis, and there's absolutely no reason in the world why they can't live together as equals. The two societies could not be more similar. Their languages are similar, their religions are similar. More than half of all Israelis are descendants of people who came from the Middle East, descendants of Arab Jews who came from Iraq, North Africa, Yemen. Arab culture is part of who they are. There are no differences, and the likelihood of both populations seeing their common cause and their common goals as outweighing any differences that might exist between them is far greater than anything else. And then young Palestinians and young Israelis can grow up and have a future and live in a real democracy and do great things. But the name of the game has to be democracy and equal rights, not anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Wissam. Earl, you have 5 minutes. Closing statement.
Like Wissam, I don't want to end this on a negative note as well. But my friend, if your principle is, and as much as there has been wrongdoing towards Palestinian Arabs in the territories and such. It is a subtle justification in your words to say it is okay. Hang on, and let's take Hebron out of it, the Hebron massacre, okay? We're talking about entering into cafes in Tel Aviv. If it was military to military, that's one thing. But when you start walking into cafes in Tel Aviv, and that's what those suicide bombings were, that the so-called apartheid wall has actually stopped. That's killing of innocent civilians. And that type of killing is what is being celebrated in Gaza. There is not a single, and you would probably know this, my friend, there is not a single textbook within the education system in Israel that describes Arabs or Palestinians as dogs or apes. Yet Abbas himself has admitted that the textbooks that are currently being taught in the West Bank have to be changed. The euphemisms, the descriptions are completely racist, and they're genocidal. They have to stop. And at some point, and this is what I'm going to say, at some point somewhere in the Arab world, someone has to get up. Someone tried, Sadat tried, and we saw what happened to him. I worry for Abbas because I think deep down he's terrified of the idea of making a peace agreement with Israel, because the Hamas side is going to come across the border as a terrorist or as a treasonist and kill him. He's in a real difficult spot. There has to be someone within the Muslim Arab world that is going to have the courage like Sadat did and say we have to find a way to accept each other and come together with two homelands. We have to stop with these textbooks of hate. We have to stop calling suicide bombers shaheed, martyrs. It's got to end. And yes, you can bring up a dozen examples of radical, extreme right-wing settlers doing things. I'm sure it exists. But the difference is, my friend, it isn't universally celebrated within Israeli society. They don't put it on TV. I've watched Memory TV, MEMRI TV, and they continually translate programs. And they had this one program in Egypt, and they brought these two guys in. It was a TV program in Egypt, and then they suddenly thought they'd play a joke on him. And they said, guess what? You're on Israeli TV. And when he began to think that it wasn't a joke, he went ballistic and went for his gun. I will not be on any station with a Jew. He went nutso, and they had to calm him down. He slapped the woman very hard in the face. You know what her response was? I deserved it for saying that possibly you're on a Jewish network. It's out there. It's public knowledge. You can watch it. That kind of stuff has to stop. You wouldn't see that on Israeli TV if they went, oh, hey, guess what? You're on Hamas TV. I'm sure the Jewish guy would just joke, oh, that's great. He wouldn't go, oh no. He wouldn't slap the woman for saying, oh, you implied I'm on an Arab network. Most of them wouldn't. They'd probably have a laugh out of it. You know, that's got to stop. The idea that you would go ballistic and this hate and slap a woman in the face because someone joked that you're on Israeli TV.
2 minutes, bro.
I've never been to Israel,
sir,
and I'm not Jewish.
Sir, it's got your time.
It's got to stop. The bitterness on both sides has got to stop. Someone has to rise out amongst the Arab population, like Sadat did, and Abbas is trying. I'll give him credit to it, but I think he's in a dangerous spot. I think what Hamas has said about him, they've called him treasonous. They've said you have no right to negotiate on behalf of these Palestinians. They've said it over and over again. So even if, and I'll leave you with this, even if Abbas makes a deal with the state of Israel, what next? What do we do with Gaza? You know, maybe the statements that are coming out of Gaza from Hamas are true and sincere, that they've decided that this ludicrous war on Jews has got to end and maybe we can make peace. I hope it's right. I hope it's sincere. I'm not convinced it is. But if it isn't, they'll probably annex Gaza, and that'll be the end of the story. Thank you.
And thank you all for coming out today. We have to wrap this up at some point, and apparently our time is up, according to the boss. My name is Jeff Willerton. It's been fun to moderate, and hope to see you next week when we'll be discussing another issue at the other end of the park.
Thank you, everyone. I'm sorry. We appreciate that there are still a few people that have some issues to discuss. We hope that at a later date we may try and revisit this again, because we know that there are so many issues around this. We thank you. We thank the people from both sides. We thank our speakers. It's important that these issues get aired and that people are aware of what's going on from both sides. If anyone has any concerns that they'd like to discuss with me, I have some information I can give you where you can contact me. This video will be on the Speakers Corner Calgary website which is on Facebook. If anyone wants any more information on this, please contact me. Thank you.